Hi learners, we're starting a new unit today on punctuating dialogue, which is really just using quotation marks correctly. This may be a review for you, and that's fine. Never hurts to review. If it's new to you, then you should recognize this from some of your Barton lessons. You're noticing that Barton is using some quotes, and you might be wondering what the patterns are, what the rules are with quotes, and this should help clarify that for you. So the first step that we need to do before we go forward is you need to have a red, a green, and a blue colored pencil. Pause if you need to go get that. You also need a regular pencil for putting your name at the top of your paper. All right, so let's get started. Let's put our name at the top. And let's put the date here. Whatever the date is for you is fine. And what we're going to do is learn about dialogue tags. And so I'm going to underline the word tag in red because this is very important. A dialogue tag is a short phrase that tells you who was speaking and how they were saying it. So let's read this together. It says, "Let's go to the park," Jonah said. In this sentence, the dialogue tag is Jonah said because it tells who was speaking, that's Jonah, and it explains how he said it, which is just normal speaking, just said. The next thing we're going to look at is the quotation marks, which you're going to need green for. So you'll notice that around what Jonah is saying, there are these marks called quotation marks. It looks like 2 commas that are flying up in the air. So we're going to just circle those with green. There's one of those marks right before his first word, and there's one after his last word. And then we're going to grab our blue. What you'll notice is that right after he's done speaking, so after the word park, there's a comma. That comma comes after the word park, but before the quotation mark. That's important. Let's circle that with blue. The reason for that is because this is not the end of the whole sentence, because that's here after the dialogue tag, but it is the end of what he's saying. So we're going to mark that with blue. All right. And then let's see. Just make sure that you acknowledge that there's a period at the very, very end of the sentence, okay? Let's look at the next one. "I love my new kitten," Maggie exclaimed. So we need to find the tag at the end, which would be Maggie exclaimed. Who said it? Maggie. How did she say it? She exclaimed it. She's very excited. And there is an exclamation point here, so that matches up. Now, we're going to show where the quotes are. There's a quote right before her very first word that she speaks. And there's a quote after her last word that she speaks and after that exclamation point. And now we're going to mark our punctuation inside the quote, which in this case is an exclamation point. If a character is excited and they're speaking in an excited way, it is okay to put an exclamation point there or a question mark, because it's part of how they're talking. So we would have quote, "I love my new kitten," exclamation point, end quote, and then the dialogue tag, and then the period. As a matter of fact, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put a little arrow to the period at the end of these sentences because it's important that you know when there's a quote, there's usually 2 punctuation marks at least. There's one at the end of the quote and there's one at the end of the sentence, at least when the tag is at the end. All right, last one. "Do you want ice cream?" he asked. So our tag at the end is he asked. Who said it? He. And we don't know who that is, but that's okay. And it's describing how he said it, which is he's asking a question. Our quotes are going to be right before his first word and at the very end of his quote, after his last word and that punctuation. And then since he's asking a question, we end his quote with a question mark because that would be correct. When the tag is at the end, we would still need a period after it. Okay, so that's what we're noting. Let's practice that here. Number 1. It's raining outside, said Mrs. Bat or Batty, don't know which one. So the first thing we need to do is identify our dialogue tag, said Mrs. Bat. And since the dialogue tag is at the end, just like these, we're going to put a period there. Now, I need to put in some quotation marks. I know that she starts talking here, so my quotes are going to go here in green. And the last word that she says is outside, so I'm going to put my other quote here. Now, I need one more item. I need one more punctuation. After she's done speaking, I need something. I either need a comma or an exclamation point or a question mark. Since she's not yelling or exclaiming or asking anything, she's just saying it, I'm going to put a comma because just calm, regular speech. There's nothing too exciting going on. Make sure that comma is slightly inside of the end quote. And that's how we're going to mark these. Let's look at number 2. I made a 100 on my spelling test. I shouted. Ooh, we're shouting. So we're very excited. First, let's identify the dialogue tag. Who's speaking? I. And how did they speak? They shouted. They're very excited. After the dialogue tag at the end, since it's at the end, we need a period. Now let's put those quotes on. The first word this person says is I. And then the last word they say is test. I'm going to leave a little room because I know I need a mark there. Now, if they're shouting, they probably would have an exclamation point there right before the end quote. All right, so that's all set. And then let's see number 3. What is 4 times 4? Asked Abe. All right, first thing we need to do is find our dialogue tag at the end. Abe is asking. Period at the end. Now we get to do our quotes, okay? So what is the first word Abe says? And 4 is the last word he says. And since he's asking a question, he would need a question mark right in there. All right, very good. So now we're going to learn about, well, what happens if the tag is at the beginning? So actually, here's what we're going to do. We're going to circle tag. We're going to connect it to beginning because now we're learning about a flip-flop version of what we just did. Come back up here and make our notes match. Okay, so these were tags at the end. Now we're going to have tags at the beginning. So let's see how this works. Jonah said, comma, quote, let's go to the park, period, quote. Let's find our dialogue tag first. Who's speaking? Jonah. And how did he speak? He just said it. Okay. Now, when the tag is at the beginning, you can't just immediately go into the quote. You have to put a comma there. So I'm going to circle that. Then he starts talking. Let's go to the park. This is where he's done talking. And because what he says comes at the end of the sentence, we still have to have an end mark. So that gets a period. Let's look at the next one. Remember, the tag is at the beginning in these. Maggie exclaimed, I love my new kitten. Well, dialogue tag is here. Maggie exclaimed. After the tag, if it's at the beginning of the sentence, we're going to put a comma there. And then when she speaks, we need quotes around that. Because she's exclaiming and she's excited, there's an exclamation point there. So we will go ahead and circle that. So we have the tag and a comma, then our quote, quotation. I love my new kitten, which is what she says. End punctuation to show she's excited, and an end quote. And then our last example. He asked, do you want ice cream? So since the tag is at the beginning, we're going to say, well, here's the tag. He asked, There's going to be a comma before he starts speaking. And then he starts speaking. So we have a quote. Do you want ice cream? He's done talking. And at the end of his question, but before the quotation mark, we have a question mark. Okay, so it will be tag, comma, quote, whatever they say, end mark, and quote. So these are the examples. Let's do some together. Mrs. Bat said, it's raining outside. Ooh, it's the same as before, but it's just moved around. So our dialogue tag is here. Mrs. Bat said, and before we put any quotes, we have to put a comma. Quotation here. Quotation here. And she's not shouting or asking, so we're going to put a period at the end. It must be inside of that quotation mark. Now, there's one other thing on here that needs fixing, which is this I. Because whenever someone starts talking, if it's the first thing they say, you have to capitalize it. It's a lot of rules for quotations. That's why we practice it so much. Let's look at number 2. I shouted, I made a 100 on my spelling test. Okay. So let's find our tag. Who's speaking? I. How did they speak? They shouted. We're going to put our comma there. And then they start talking. I made a 100 on my spelling test. So at the beginning of their quote, I'm going to put that. Now, since they're excited and they're shouting, we would definitely put an exclamation there. And then that's the end of what they said. So let's do number 3. Abe asked, what is 4 times 4? So let's look at our tag. Abe asked. And then we have to have a comma. This is where he starts talking. So we're going to put a quote there. What is 4 times 4? Now, I know he's asking a question. So we will put a question mark there, and then the quote is done. He's done speaking, so we put that punctuation or the quotation mark. The only other thing we have to fix is this needs to be a capital W because it's the first thing that Abe says. All right, it's a lot of rules. We're going to practice it a lot, and you're going to do great. So that was our mini lesson, and then the next page is going to be starting some practice.